The woman in the wrong dress. It was a bright Saturday afternoon, and the glass doors of the luxurious Hillwood Estates country club slowly opened as a sleek black car rolled up. Inside the club, chandeliers sparkled, the floor shone like a mirror, and the scent of expensive perfume floated in the air. It was a place where the elite gathered to drink, gossip, and silently judge Dot. Near the center of the club's grand hall stood a group of women dressed in gowns that could pay someone's rent for a year. Their hair was done in perfect waves, and their nails sparkled like diamonds. They were laughing, not the kind of laughter that comes from joy, but the kind that stings, mocking, sharp. Who invited her? Whispered one of them, a tall woman with icy blue eyes and a necklace that screamed wealth. Her name was Brielle. She had grown up rich, married richer, and believed kindness was only for the cameras. The women turned to look at the new guest, who had just walked in. She wore a long, simple beige dress, slightly wrinkled from travel. Her shoes were plain, her hair loosely tied in a messy braid. She held a soft smile and clutched a worn-out leather bag as she looked around. Her name was Elena. She was a foreigner, not from their city, not from their world. She spoke with a slight accent and moved with a calmness that didn't match the rush of Hillwood's elite. Her presence made them uncomfortable, not because she did anything wrong, but because she didn't try to be like them. Maybe she's someone's assistant, said another woman, laughing. Or maybe she got lost on her way to the kitchen. They all chuckled, but Elena didn't seem to hear them. She walked with gentle confidence, her eyes wandering up toward the ceiling, admiring the design. It was as if she truly saw beauty in things others took for granted. She didn't come here to impress anyone. She came because she was invited. The invitation had arrived 2 weeks ago, handwritten in gold ink, with her name spelled perfectly. She almost didn't go. She didn't like fancy places. But something inside her said she should dot as she walked. Toward the refreshment table, people parted like water around her. Not in welcome, but in discomfort. Some glanced, some stared. No one smiled. Excuse me, she said softly to the server behind the table. Could I please have a glass of water? The server nodded, slightly confused by her presence, and handed her the glass. Brielle approached slowly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She studied Elena like a scientist might study a rare insect. You look comfortable, Brielle said with a tone that carried knives. Elena smiled gently. Thank you. It's beautiful here. Brielle's lips curled in the tiniest smirk. Where did you say you're from? I live just outside the city now, Elena said. But I'm originally from a small village, far away. Brielle's eyes narrowed. That explains the dress. Elena didn't react. It must be nice, Brielle continued, to come here and get a little taste of our world. Are you visiting someone? Elena took a sip of water and looked directly at her. I was invited. Brielle laughed. Of course. Aren't we all? Then came Harper, another woman from the elite circle, her voice louder and more dramatic. Ladies, has anyone told her about the donation requirement yet? Poor thing must think it's just tea and cookies. Brielle gasped, pretending to be shocked. Oh my, yes, every guest gives a donation of at least $20,000. It's for the orphanage project. Elena raised an eyebrow. That's a generous cause. It is, Harper said smugly. And we only accept checks from real banks, darling. No paper coins. They all laughed again. Elena didn't. She nodded, reached into her worn leather bag, and pulled out a checkbook. The room grew quieter. With steady hands. She scribbled something on a check, tore it out, and handed it to Harper. Harper took the check, her face still wearing amusement. But the moment her eyes scanned the numbers, the color drained from her face. This must be a mistake. She whispered, "Briell," snatched it, and read aloud. $250,000? Everyone froze. You missed a zero, right? One of the women said. Elena smiled softly. No, I didn't. Brielle's voice trembled just slightly. Who? Who are you? Elena took a moment, then said, someone who grew up with very little. And Someone who remembers what it felt like to be laughed at when you have nothing? There was silence. Only the soft hum of the chandelier lights filled the air before anyone could speak again. A deep voice called out from the far end of the, "Oh, Miss Elena, I'm so glad you made it." It was the chairman of the Hillwood Estates Foundation. He was walking quickly toward her, arms open. He reached her and gave her a warm handshake, treating her like an old friend. "Ladies," he said, turning to the shocked group. "This is Elena Costa. She funded our entire clean water project last year in Africa. Without her, hundreds of children wouldn't have access to drinking water. And guess what? She did it anonymously." The women stood frozen. Briel's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Elena turned to them and nodded kindly. "Thank you for the conversation. I hope the orphanage gets what it needs." As she began to walk away, the sting of shame hit the women like cold wind. The laughter was gone. The pride had vanished, but it wasn't over because upstairs, in a private lounge, someone had been watching everything. A young man in a tailored suit with a sharp jawline and calculating eyes. His name was Nolan Banks, heir to one of the most powerful families in the city. He leaned back in his chair, his interest piqued. Finally, he whispered to himself, "Someone worth watching." He picked up his phone and made a quick call. "Kind, out everything you can about Elena Costa, now." Meanwhile, downstairs, Elena had stepped out onto the wide balcony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. She leaned against the railing. Feeling the wind touch her face, she thought about her village, about the nights she slept on a dirt floor, about the old woman who taught her how to read, and the friend who gave her a coat in winter when she had none. Money had never changed her, but it had given her the power to help others. And now, unknowingly, it was about to drag her into a world far more dangerous, far more vicious than the snobby looks and fake smiles of Hillwood Estates. She was about to be tested in ways she never expected. And the real story, the one that would change lives, hadn't even begun yet. Whispers behind Gold Door's night had passed, quietly for most of Hillwood Estates, but inside the towering walls of the bank's mansion, lights burned well past midnight. The sitting room, usually reserved for VIP guests and closed-door family meetings, now held a different kind of conversation. Nolan Banks sat by the fireplace, sipping dark espresso from a porcelain cup, while his assistant, Colin, scrolled rapidly through his tablet. Nolan's sharp eyes didn't blink. His jaw clenched slightly every time Colin paused or muttered a confused sound. "She's not on any society lists," Colin said finally, breaking the silence. "Not in real estate, not in tech, not in banking. Nothing connects her to any major trust fund or elite family." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "And yet," Colin added, flipping the screen toward him, "she donated $250,000 on a whim." Nolan took the tablet and stared at the photo on screen, a candid shot of Elena stepping onto the Hillwood Club balcony. Even in poor resolution, her poise stood out, not the kind born from status, but from something older, something deeper. There was grace in her stillness, as if she carried peace inside her, untouched by the chaos that surrounded most people. "What's in the report from the orphanage board?" Nolan asked quietly. Colin hesitated, then pulled up a new document. "The same name shows up 3 times over the last 2 years. Anonymous donations, large ones. Once in Peru, once in Uganda, and once here. Each time, the project was fully funded. Elena Costa is connected to all of them, but she's never asked for recognition." Nolan put down the cup slowly. "So she's not trying to climb the ladder," he said, more to himself than to Colin. "She already knows she's above it." He stood, walking over to the window. Outside, the city sparkled. Glittering towers, rows of lights, all designed to look powerful. But in that moment, it felt like none of them mattered. "Book me." "A table at La Taverna," he said finally. "Corner seat. 2 o'clock tomorrow. Make sure she's invited." Colin blinked. "You think she'll come?" Nolan didn't turn from the window. "I think she's not afraid of anything. And I want to know why." That morning, Far away from the chatter of society, Elena watered a row of potted herbs on her tiny balcony. The sun warmed her shoulders as she hummed an old lullaby, one she hadn't heard since she was a child in the village. Her apartment was small, filled with second-hand furniture and handmade curtains. Nothing in it matched, but everything told a story. A clay bowl from Morocco, a shawl gifted by a grandmother in India, a painting drawn by a street child in Brazil. Elena didn't collect things for beauty. She collected moments. The knock on the door came gently. She opened it to find a young woman in a sleek black suit holding a white envelope. "Good morning," the woman said politely. "I've been asked to deliver this personally." Elena thanked her, closed the door, and sat down to open the envelope. Inside was a note written in elegant script. "Miss Costa, it would be an honor to share a conversation with you over lunch at no expectations, just curiosity. N.B. Elena read note twice. She knew who NB was. Everyone in the city did. The Banks family name was on half the buildings downtown. And yet the invitation felt strangely honest. There were no strings, no demands, only curiosity. She placed the note down and returned to her herbs. The restaurant stood like a quiet jewel in the middle of the busy city. La Taverna was known, not for how it looked, but who it turned away. It didn't have a sign outside. You didn't walk in, you were brought in. Elena arrived just before 2, dressed in a long emerald green skirt and a white linen blouse. Simple, elegant. She wore no makeup, just a pair of small silver earrings shaped like leaves. Her sandals were flat and comfortable. She carried herself like someone who didn't care how others looked at her, and that, ironically, made every head turn. The Mater D led her through the restaurant, past businessmen, actresses, politicians. All paused for a moment to wonder who she was. In the far corner, Nolan stood as she approached. He wore a tailored navy suit, but his posture was relaxed, respectful. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out her chair. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied softly. They sat. For the first few moments, neither spoke. The server poured water. Menus were offered, but Elena waved hers away politely. "I'll just have tea," she said. Nolan studied her carefully. "Do you mind if I ask who you really are?" he said finally. Elena looked up at him. "Is that a question of where I'm from, or what I've done?" "Both," he admitted. Elena didn't smile, but her voice remained calm. "I come from a village where people shared food even when they had none. I left when I was 15, and since then, I've worked, traveled, helped where I could." "What I've done doesn't always come with receipts." "But it matters to me," Nolan leaned in. "You gave away $250,000 without flinching." "Money is only a tool," she said. "Some people use it to build walls. I use it to build wells." He sat back, momentarily speechless. "But why anonymously?" he asked. "Because the children who need clean water don't care who paid for it," she replied. "They only care that it comes." For the first time, Nolan felt something stir in him. Discomfort, admiration, something harder to define. He had grown up in wealth. His lessons were about power, leverage, strategy. But sitting in front of Elena, he felt like a student again. Not of money, but of meaning. He wanted to ask more. How she made her money. What she wanted in return. But something about her made those questions feel small. So instead he asked, "Have you ever made a mistake you regret?" Elena looked away, her gaze softening. "Yes," she said quietly. "I once left someone behind when they needed me most." Nolan didn't press. Later that night, after they parted with polite words and distant smiles, Elena walked home through the quieter streets. The sky had darkened, and the city lights reflected off puddles from a recent rain. As she neared her building, a figure stepped out from the shadows. A young man in a hoodie. Not threatening, just tired. He looked at her and paused. You're Elena, right?" She nodded cautiously. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I just ... I recognized you from the charity site. You helped my mother last year. The wheelchair. She can move again." Elena blinked slowly. He reached into his pocket and handed her a small bracelet made of thread. I made this for you, he said. It's not much. She took it gently, tears forming in her eyes. It's everything. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she felt the weight of the day, the lunch, the eyes, the past she hadn't spoken about, but above all, she felt something else rising, like the wind before a storm, because what she didn't know yet was that someone had followed her, someone who didn't like seeing their spotlight taken by a nobody, someone from Hillwood Estates, and that someone had just sent an email to a gossip site with Elena's name and picture, the title, Foreign Woman Scams Elite Society with Fake Donations. The war had begun. When silence breaks, Elena sat at her kitchen table, staring at the teacup in front of her. The sunlight filtered through the window, painting the room in soft gold, but nothing felt warm. Her hand rested beside her phone, which buzzed every few seconds with new notifications. She hadn't opened any of them at first. She didn't understand the sudden storm that morning. She had gone to the small grocery store around the corner, like she always did. The woman behind the counter, who used to greet her with a kind smile, avoided her gaze. Two teenagers whispered as she passed. Even the old man who walked his dog every morning didn't nod today. When she returned home, the phone began to ring. First, a call from a number she didn't recognize. Then another dot and another dot. She finally answered one. Is this Elena, Costa? The voice asked. Yes, she said slowly. This is Vanessa from Star City today. We'd like to give you a chance to respond to the fraud allegations. She ended the call. She didn't know what they were talking about. But something told her it wasn't going to stop there. Now. Hours later, she finally opened her browser. And there it was. A headline in bold. Cruel letters. The truth behind the mysterious woman at Hillwood. Fake heiress or master manipulator. Below it, a picture of her taken from the balcony at Hillwood Estates. Her soft smile, her plain dress, the wind in her hair. The article claimed she had pretended to be rich to gain entry into elite circles. It said she forged donation checks to gain influence and then disappeared before anyone could verify the money. It quoted unnamed sources from the club. There were no facts, only suspicion. Elena's throat tightened. She felt as if her lungs had forgotten how to breathe. It was a lie. Every word, but lies have a way of growing faster than truth. She scrolled down to the comments. She looks like a scammer to me. That dress? Please, she's not fooling anyone. Who let her in there in the first place? These foreign nobodies think they can buy class. She stopped reading. Her hands shook. She wasn't scared of being poor again. She wasn't scared of losing comfort. What scared her now was that the quiet work she had done, the hospitals she helped build, the scholarships she funded, the women she supported, all of it could be destroyed by one false story. And worse, the people she helped might suffer from her silence. She stood slowly, her breath uneven, and stepped out onto her small balcony. The city noise buzzed below. Cars honked. Someone laughed. A plane flew overhead. Everything seemed normal, and yet nothing felt right. Then her phone buzzed again. A message. From Nolan. Do you have 10 minutes? Meet me, please. 20 minutes later, she was walking into a small cafe tucked between an art store and a florist. It was quiet, with warm wooden tables and the scent of fresh bread. Nolan sat at the back, looking like he hadn't slept. He stood when he saw her and pulled out a chair. Thank you for coming, he said softly. She sat down. I assume you've seen it. He nodded, leaning forward. I want you to know I didn't believe a word of it. Not even for a second. She studied his face. But the others did, she said. Didn't they? He hesitated. Some, not all. Enough? She whispered. He nodded. Someone from Hillwood planted it, he said. I have a contact at Star City. The tip came from an anonymous source, but the language, the tone, I've heard it before. It sounds like Brielle. Elena looked away, her voice distant. I didn't come here to impress them. I thought it was an event for charity. Nolan shook his head. You showed them who they really were, and people like bat hate being seen. She closed her eyes for a moment. So, what now? She asked. Let them lie until it dies? Or, he said gently, you fight. Her eyes opened slowly. Fight how? He reached into his coat and pulled out a small folder. Transparency, he said. Your donations? The names? The receipts? All of it. If you'll allow me, I'll verify everything. Not to prove you're wealthy, but to prove you're real. Elena hesitated. She had spent her whole life trying not to be noticed. She gave quietly, disappeared quickly. Never asked for thanks, Dot, but now they were calling her a fraud. And worse, they were using her silence to erase what truly mattered. Okay, she said finally. I'll give you everything. For the next 3 days, Nolan and his team worked around the clock. Elena handed over papers, letters, even hand-signed thank you cards from organizations she had helped. Water project blueprints, school ledgers, bank transfers. Every time they verified a detail. They were stunned. She had helped fund over 20 different causes across 7 countries, from prosthetics for children to solar lamps for villages with no electricity. No headlines, no interviews. Just quiet impact. On the 4th day, Nolan asked her to meet him again. This time, in his office, a tall glass tower overlooking the city. When she entered, he stood up, but there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Something like awe. You're not just generous, he said quietly. You're extraordinary. She smiled faintly. I'm just someone who remembers what hunger feels like. He nodded. Then you need to speak. Not for you. For everyone who thinks kindness makes you weak. You want me to go public? She asked. Yes, he said. They need to hear your voice. She looked at him for a long time, then, finally, she said, okay. The press conference was held in a modest hall. Elena refused the suggestion of a luxury venue. She didn't want glamour. She wanted truth. The room filled quickly. Reporters, cameras, some curious elite guests. Even Brielle was there, hidden in the back row, her expression unreadable. Elena walked to the podium slowly. No makeup. No stylist. Just her calm presence. She took a breath and began. A few days ago, a story was published about me. A story. Full of lies. It said I was pretending to be rich. That I faked donations. That I used others for attention. She paused. None of it is true. The room was silent. I've spent the last 10 years using what little I earned to help others. Not because I wanted applause. Because I wanted change. She took out a stack of papers. These are the records. Every donation. Every project. Every child who received care. This isn't a defense. It's a mirror. She looked out over the crowd. We live in a world where the rich are respected without question, and the simple are gouged without mercy. I didn't come here to change minds. I came here to remind you that wealth isn't always visible, and kindness is not weakness. A single clap broke the silence. Then another. Then the room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. But Elena didn't wait for them. She stepped away from the podium. Out of the lights, back into the quiet she always chose. That night, as the story aired on every major network, a different headline began to spread. The woman they mocked. Turns out she changed the world. But in a dark apartment across the city, Brielle stared at the television, her fists clenched. She picked up her phone, called someone, and said coldly, if that woman thinks this is over, she's wrong. We're just getting started. What she didn't know was that her own secrets, buried beneath years of lies and golden invitations, were about to rise. The price of dignitized morning air was crisp, but Elena barely noticed. She sat by her apartment window, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of chamomile tea, eyes lost in the motion of the world outside. Traffic buzzed gently, people hurried past, and the city moved on, just as it always had. Yet inside, everything felt still. Too still. After the press conference, the world had exploded around her. Some people applauded her bravery. Others questioned her motives. Messages flooded in, thousands of them, from strangers she had never met. Some wrote to say thank you. others to accuse her of pretending to be a hero. Every word she read was a reminder that the world never liked things it couldn't put in a box. But Elena didn't answer. Not yet. She wasn't afraid of opinions. She was afraid of what pride could do to people. And right now, pride was making enemies out of people she had never harmed. Across town. Brielle was sitting in the office of a man named Hugh Gordon, a powerful publicist with a cruel smile and a reputation for destroying reputations. She humiliated me. Brielle, throwing down a tablet showing Elena's conference clip in front of everyone. She made me look like a jealous fool. Hugh leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. She didn't make you look like that, he said coolly. You did that yourself, but I see your point. Then fix it, she hissed. I don't care how. She needs to be ruined. He tilted his head slightly. What exactly do you want people to believe? That she's not who she claims to be. That her money is dirty, stolen, whatever makes them doubt her again. He gave a slow, cruel smile. Then you'll have to pay, he said. Truth is expensive. Lies. Even more. She opened her checkbook. 2 days later, Elena was in a small school on the city's edge, sitting with a group of children learning English. She had promised to visit them weeks ago, and she kept her promises. The classroom was filled with handmade drawings, laughter, and the smell of chalk and crayons. The teacher had tears in her eyes as she hugged Elena. We thought you wouldn't. Come, she whispered. Why wouldn't I? Elena asked gently, after what they've been saying. Elena placed her hand over the teacher's and gave a small smile. Words don't scare me. Forgetting what matters does. The teacher looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Just as the children gathered to show her their drawings. Elena's phone buzzed again, urgently. Continuously, she excused herself and stepped out into the hallway. A message from Nolan. We need to talk. Now. Urgent. And a link. She tapped it. Breaking. News banner spread across the screen. Investigation launched into suspicious funds behind Elena Costa's global donations benefit. A shaky video showed a man, old, unshaven, angry, claiming he once handled money for Elena years ago and that it came from offshore accounts. There was no proof. Just words. But the world didn't wait for proof. Her hands trembled. It wasn't the first time people had doubted her. But this time, it was different because the lies weren't just hurting her. They were threatening to take down every project she had built, every child who depended on clean water, every woman she had helped escape violence. The story was no longer about humiliation. It was about destruction. Nolan's office was tense when she arrived. His team was already on calls, flipping through files, tracing every rumor. This isn't a scandal, Nolan said as he led her inside. It's a campaign. By Brielle, Elena said softly. He nodded. We confirmed she paid Hugh Gordon. We also traced the man in the video. He was paid off to speak. Elena sat down heavily. They won't stop. Not until they win, he agreed. Unless we stop them first. How? She asked. He hesitated. By being louder. We take everything public. Not just your donations, your story, where you came from. What you faced. No more quiet. No more mystery. She looked down at her hands. She had always preferred the shadows. Not because she had anything to hide, but because she never wanted to be the center of anything. It felt wrong to speak of her pain when so many others suffered in silence. But now, the silence was being used as a weapon. And if she didn't speak, someone else, someone cruel, would write her story for her. Okay, she said finally. I'll tell them everything. The interview was scheduled for the following night. A special broadcast. 1 hour. No filters. Just Elena, her voice, and her truth. In the hours before it aired, the city buzzed with speculation. Some said she'd crumble. Others said she'd confess. A few hoped she'd rise. Brielle hosted a private gathering at her estate, pouring champagne, while the broadcast played on a wide screen. Her smile never left her face. But that smile began to fade as Elena started. Speaking. The camera showed her seated alone in a modest studio. No glamour, no tricks. Just her voice, Calm and clear. My name is Elena Costa, she began. I was born in a village where the only running water came from a broken pipe 3 kilometers away. My mother died when I was 7. My father disappeared when I was 9. I grew up learning how to survive, not from books, but from watching the world. The camera didn't cut away. At 15, I boarded a cargo ship and worked cleaning toilets to reach another country. I spent nights in shelters, washed dishes for food. I didn't go to university. I didn't inherit anything. But I listened. I learned. And when I finally earned enough, I gave, not because I wanted praise, but because I never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. She paused. They're calling me a liar, a fraud, a thief. They say I don't belong in their world. Her eyes lifted, steady. They're right. The host blinked in confusion. What do you mean? I don't belong in a world where wealth is worshipped more than kindness, she said. I don't belong in a world where people are judged by the cost of their dress instead of the content of their soul. I will never belong there, and I don't want to. The broadcast ended in silence. Then, one by one, messages flooded in, not from the elite, but from nurses, school teachers, laborers, and single mothers, people who said they finally felt seen. The next morning, every major news outlet ran the same headline. Elena Costa speaks, and silences a nation, but not everyone was silent. Brielle stood by her fireplace, watching as her phone buzzed with messages, not of support, but of condemnation. Sponsors pulled out. Board members questioned her leadership, and then came the message she dreaded most. From the Hillwood Estates Committee. Your membership is under review. Her world was cracking, but she wasn't ready to let go. Find something else. She growled into the phone. Anything I want. Her ruined. What she didn't know was that her own secret, a betrayal hidden beneath polished smiles and designer gowns, was about to surface. Because Elena wasn't the only one with a past, and some truths can't stay buried forever. What the mirror reveals it was just past midnight when the old file finally arrived in Nolan's inbox. The message was short. Just one line from his investigator. Found what you were looking for, and more. Nolan opened the attachment slowly. Expecting something mild? Maybe a document showing that Brielle had paid off more people. Maybe another false claim she had cooked up. But what he saw sent a chill through him. It was a scanned copy of a contract. 10 years old. The logo at the top belonged to a charity called Grace Mothers Foundation, a small organization that had once worked to provide shelter and skills to abandoned pregnant women in Southern Europe. It had closed down 8 years ago, swallowed by scandal, and no one had spoken of it since. Until now. The document showed that a major donor, listed under a false name, had redirected funds away from the mothers' shelters into offshore private accounts. The signature at the bottom matched another one his investigator had obtained earlier from a public fundraiser. BRIELE single quotes S. But the money wasn't the shocking part. Beneath that document, there were testimonies. Handwritten letters from women who said they had been promised housing, only to be evicted once the cameras left. One woman described giving birth in a storage room. Another had tried to take her own life after losing her child to hunger. Sickness. Nolan couldn't look away, and he couldn't stay silent. He dialed Elena's number. It rang once. Then twice. Finally, her calm voice answered. Hello? I need to see you now. Elena opened the door in a soft gray sweater, her eyes tired but clear. She had barely slept since the interview. Messages still flooded in, some kind, some cruel. But her heart had found a strange calm. She had told her story. That was all she had promised herself. But Nolan's face told her something was wrong. Or maybe something was about to become right. He sat down, opened his laptop, and showed her the file. She read silently. Word by word. Page by page. And when she finished, she looked up slowly. How long have you known? She asked. Only tonight. He said, my investigator found the original foundation records buried in an old storage archive in Rome. This part of her past, no one knew it was connected to her. Not until now. Elena closed the laptop gently. If this comes out, she said, it won't just ruin her. It will destroy her name forever. Nolan waited, uncertain what she would say next. You could use this, he said. You could clear everything. Turn the tables. Elena looked away, her voice distant. I could, she said. But then I become her. He blinked. What do you mean? If I use her pain, the pain she caused others, to gain revenge, I'm not healing anything. I'm just transferring the wound. Nolan frowned. But she's trying to destroy you, Elena nodded. And if I become what she is, then she succeeds. He sat back, unsure. So what do you want to do? She paused. I want her to face herself. The next day, an envelope arrived at Briel's estate. Number name, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was grainy and old, but she knew it instantly. A picture of her, younger, dressed in a sleek black coat, standing beside the Grace Mother's Foundation sign during a photo shoot. She was smiling, holding a baby in her arms, and taped to the back was a small, handwritten note. Do you remember her? She didn't survive the winter. Brel single quotes as hands trembled. Her legs weakened beneath her. She sat down, pressing the photo too. Her chest, heart racing. She remembered. Her name had been Elena. A 17-year-old mother from Romania. Abandoned by her family, brought into the shelter under promises of care. Briel had stood beside her for a few photos, smiled for the reporters, and then signed the papers to close that shelter a week later. She never thought about it again. Until now. Panic crawled up her throat. She called Hugh Gordon. It's over, she snapped. They know. Who knows? He asked. She does, Elena. She has the file. There was silence on the other end. Then Hugh said, then you'd better confess before she decides to. Briel hung up, her hands sweaty, her heart pounding. For the first time. The mirror she had so carefully avoided was right in front of her. And what she saw was not wealth or beauty or influence. It was fear. Meanwhile, in the quiet corner of a community garden, Elena knelt beside a row of lavender, her hands deep in the soil. The scent calmed her. It always had. Planting things was her way of reminding herself that life could grow from the dirt. A child approached her. No more than 6. Are you the woman from the TV? He asked shyly. Elena smiled. I am. My mama cried when he talked, he said. She said you're not like the others. Elena touched the soil gently. Your mama sounds very kind. She said you help people, he added, even when they don't say thank you. Elena looked at him, something soft unfolding in her chest. It's not about the thanks, she said. It's about what grows after. He handed her a single daisy from behind his back. This is for you, he said. Elena took it, holding it close. As she stood up and looked at the horizon. She felt something shifting, not in the world, but inside her. A kind of strength that didn't roar, but rooted itself deeply. She didn't need revenge. She needed truth. The next morning, the city woke to a surprise. Briel Stone released a public video statement. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the storm inside her. I have made mistakes, she said. Years ago, I was part of an organization that failed the very people it claimed to help. I was young, reckless, and worse, I ignored the pain it caused. I cannot undo what I did, but I can no longer hide from it. She paused. I have wronged Elena Costa, through actions, through silence, and through cruelty. And she, in turn, chose not to destroy me. She gave me something I never gave her. Grace. The video ended, and in homes across the city, people stared at their screens, stunned. Nolan called Elena. Did you tell her to do that? No, Elena replied softly. I just reminded her she was human. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Elena sat at the same cafe where she had once met Nolan for the first time. He joined her again, this time with no laptop, no file. Just coffee. You changed the game, he said. No, she replied. I changed the rules, he smiled. So, what now? She looked out the window, where a group of children were playing tag across the sidewalk, their laughter filling the air. Now, she said, I built something that lasts. But Just as the words left her mouth, her phone buzzed once more. This time, from an international number. She hesitated, then answered. A soft voice spoke. Miss Costa. I'm calling on behalf of the Global Humanitarian Awards. You've been nominated unanimously. They'd like you to speak in Geneva 3 weeks from now. Elena blinked, caught off guard. Are you sure? She asked. They are, the voice replied. They've seen what you've done. The whole world has. Elena looked down at her daisy, still fresh in a glass on the table. Okay, she said. I'll go. But as she hung up, neither she nor Nolan noticed the figure standing across the street, watching. A woman in a coat, sunglasses shielding her face. A voice note on her phone played softly. You think Elena Costa's story is over? It hasn't even started. The stage beneath the stars 3 weeks later. The sky above Geneva shimmered with city lights, their reflections dancing on the surface of Lake Leman. The air was cold, but it carried an energy, the kind that wrapped around the hearts of those gathered inside the grand hall of the International Forum. Tonight was the Global Humanitarian Awards, and for the first time in its history, the ceremony felt less like a stage for applause and more like a space for awakening. Inside the hall, diplomats, scientists, artists, and leaders of humanitarian missions filled rows of velvet chairs. Cameras rolled, phones blinked quietly, and whispers floated like perfume. The room was elegant, gold-trimmed walls, crystal, chandeliers, soft music drifting from a quartet near the entrance. And in the middle of it all, sitting quietly in the third row, was Elena. She wore a long blue gown, simple and smooth, with no jewelry, no designer label. Her hair was pulled back into a soft bun. Her eyes held calm, but beneath that calm, there was something else rising. Not fear, not pride, but readiness. A voice rang out across the hall. Crisp and formal. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next honoree, Miss Elena Costa. Recognized for her silent contributions to clean water, education, and human dignity. Across 7 countries, and for reminding the world that true generosity asks for nothing in return. The applause began as a gentle ripple. Then it grew, louder, fuller, sincere. Not the clapping of social obligation, but the kind that came from the chest. Elena stood slowly, her footsteps quiet against the marble floor as she approached the podium. The room fell into a hush. She looked out across the faces. So many powerful people, so many polished lives. And yet, beneath it all, she knew every one of them had once been small, scared, or uncertain. They just didn't show it anymore. She took a breath. Then she began. When I was a child, I used to sleep on a mat made of straw beside a broken window. The wind would come in at night, and my grandmother would tell me, if you can still feel the cold, you're still alive. And if you're alive, you can change something. A soft silence fell over the room. I have been many things in my life, she continued. A dishwasher, a maid, a traveler, a woman who couldn't speak the local language, a stranger in places where I had no name. But through all the seasons, one thing stayed with me. A question. Not, what can I become, but how can I help? Her voice was steady, but her eyes began to glisten. They tried to shame me for my dress, my accent, my silence. They wrote stories about me that weren't true. They tried to remind me that I didn't belong. She looked up now, her gaze firm. But what they didn't understand is this. I never needed to belong to their world. Because I belong to the world of mothers who cry at night over sick children. I belong to the girl walking 3 miles for water, to the boy stitching shoes to feed his sister. I belong to those without voices. The room was frozen. This award, she said softly, holding it up, isn't mine. It belongs to every person who gave what little they had to help another. This is not a prize. This is a reminder, and I accept it on behalf of those still in the shadows. Applause thundered now. Some people stood. Some wiped tears from their cheeks. The quartet began to play a slow, emotional piece. The night had shifted, but as Elena stepped away from the stage, Someone stopped her. A woman, dressed in black, her face pale, her eyes hidden behind dark glasses. She stepped out from the wings and extended her hand. Miss Costa, she said in a thick accent. Do you remember Romania? Elena froze. Yes, she said slowly. It was my first project. A village outside Bucharest. The woman removed her glasses. Beneath them, her eyes brimmed with something between sorrow and relief. You saved me, she whispered. I was 17. I was pregnant. You brought a doctor to our shelter. My son is alive because of you. Elena's breath caught. What's your name? She asked softly. Elena, the woman replied. I was named after my mother. The shelter was closed after you left. But your kindness, it stayed. It taught me to survive. Tears rolled down Elena's cheeks. She had never known what happened to the people. She helped, not all of them. She had left many places before the work was done, trusting others to finish it. She always hoped. But hope had often felt like a quiet ache. And now here was Elena, alive, strong and standing before her. I'm so glad you found me, Elena said, her voice breaking. Elena smiled. I didn't find you. You never left. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Elena stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking Lake Lehman. The wind tugged gently at her dress. The lights shimmered on the water. Nolan joined her a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of warm cider. You were magnificent, he said. Elena took the cup and stared at the stars. It wasn't me, she said. It was all of them. The people I met. The ones who kept going when everything said, stop. He nodded. You gave them a voice. She turned to him, her expression calm. Nolan, she said, this isn't the end. This stage, this award, it's not a finish line. What is it then? It's the start of something bigger. Something that doesn't just help people quietly. Something that builds real change. What are you thinking? A foundation, she said. For people like me, for those who want to give, not just money, but time, skill, heart, no hierarchy, just humanity. Nolan smiled. Then let's build it. And they stood there, 2 people who once belonged to different worlds, now united not by wealth or status or fame, but by a belief that kindness could be louder than cruelty. And dignity could last longer than any scandal. Weeks passed, and slowly, something changed in the city, and beyond .BRIEOO after her public apology withdrew from high society. She wasn't seen at galas anymore. She stopped appearing in magazines. But somewhere quietly, she started volunteering at a shelter outside the city. Some said she was doing penance. Others said she was rediscovering herself. Elena never spoke ill of her, because she knew sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who were hurting all along. As for Elena, the Roots of Grace Foundation opened its first global center in Morocco, followed by another in Chile. People from all walks of life joined. Doctors, teachers, retired nurses, farmers, former refugees. No one asked about your past, only what you could give now. And everywhere Elena went, people whispered stories of a woman in a plain dress who once walked into a room full of diamonds and reminded them all what real worth looked like. She never sought applause again, but applause followed her like a shadow. One evening, years later, an old woman sat under a fig tree outside her home in a quiet village. Beside her, a little girl read a book about heroes. Nana, the child said, was this woman real? The one who helped all those people. The old woman smiled. Very real. Do you think I can be like her? The old woman looked at her, touched her cheek gently, and said, you already are. Because being like her doesn't start with having a lot. It starts with giving what little you can. The wind moved gently through the leaves, and somewhere, far from applause, Elena Costa planted a seed in another corner of the world. Where it would grow. Quietly. Powerfully. Forever.